Well, hello everybody. I'll wait a few minutes um, for people to join. So today I wanted to split this live stream between talking about academic writing and then talking about what we're currently reading. And the idea came from essentially me trying to write papers, and also as I'm trying to write a journal article. And I started feeling very frustrated, as if I didn't have any direction. And so I wanted to talk about some of the things that I've been struggling with and what has been helping me. But I want to first acknowledge that I am probably not alone in feeling this frustrated. Hello, William. Yeah, I probably am not alone in feeling so frustrated. So I read this quote earlier this week that I need to read. It says, "Most graduate students have to take a scholarly writing course in their first year." This is in the context of an article that I was reading about how to write and publish as an academic. And when I read that sentence, it made me so angry because no, I did not take a scholarly writing course in my first year. That wasn't even offered. And I have been in a few institutions, so this isn't about a particular university. This, I think, is a larger problem with graduate schools and what they don't teach students. There's so much focus on coursework, which is important. But at the end of the day, what you get hired on is your publications. And people I've known who've tried to get things published, they don't get much direction. And it's so frustrating. So that got me angry, and I was like, okay, clearly I'm not alone in feeling like there was some training that I missed out on. And I want to fix that. There is an entire part of YouTube dedicated to writing, predominantly fiction writing, and it's called AuthorTube. And I have found it to be really valuable because even though the genre expectations differ between fiction writing and nonfiction writing, obviously, and you're addressing different audiences, writing is writing, and there is a lot that I have learned from, people talking about fiction writing. However, there's not much about academic writing particularly. And because I'm finding this stuff to be helpful, I might start talking about this more on my channel, not as someone who knows what she's doing, because I don't. I mean, that's precisely the problem. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just trying things and figuring out what's going on. So the book that I found that has been really helpful is called The Work of Writing. It's by Elizabeth Rankin. I think it's an older book now. And basically, so Elizabeth Rankin was like a professor of rhetoric or something, and she had been part of this faculty writing group for a while. And she gives tips about academic writing through the stories she tells about real things that have happened in these faculty writing groups. And it hit me that we don't have graduate student writing groups, not in the humanities. And so, I think we're just kind of left alone. There's this feeling that, it's not like these professors, once they get their PhD, are suddenly just, experts at academic writing. No, they actually form groups and they become critique partners and they send each other chapters. And I'm just like, yes, that's what goes on in the fiction writing world. So, it's okay. And she mentions, for example, bouncing ideas off of others, to try to clarify your ideas in the early stages of your paper. And I get this feeling that, this is sort of my insecurities. This has nothing to do with my advisor, but I get this feeling that I'm supposed to come in with this already done thing and then ask for help. And, knowing that it's often through communications and in these kind of communities that we can clarify our arguments. So what I wanted to do was just kind of throw out some thoughts that I have. So it's kind of the results of a brainstorming session that I had as I tried to make sense of the things that I've struggled with the most and things I felt is lacking. And then if any of these things sound relatable, even if you aren't in academia, even if you do fiction writing or, trade like more popular nonfiction writing. Hello, Falalu. It's a cool name. So I wanted to just kind of talk about the things that came to mind, the things that I've been struggling with respect to academic writing. But if any of these ring true, whether or not you are dealing with this type of writing, just, we can talk about it, just mention in the chat. But these are some of the thoughts that I've had, things that I've struggled with. So the first thing that I want to mention is my writing speed. So I am extremely slow as a writer, and I've known this for a long time because it used to take me like 2 hours to write a page. 3 hours, I don't even know. It was just crazy. And that's because I was editing as I was going along. But it's a real problem because if you're writing a 20-page paper, it takes you like 3 weeks. And I want to be a more efficient writer so that I can get drafts out more quickly. Otherwise, it'll take me 15 years to write my dissertation. We don't want that. So for me, it's writing efficiency and trying to figure out how to write a good outline. What should I include in an outline? I know that I need some planning, but I also realize that it's in the process of writing that I'm able to clarify my ideas. So that is one thing. Other things, genre expectations. So Elizabeth Rankin in her book, The Work of Writing, talks about how students are taught how to do school writing. So even the dissertation is a school writing piece. And what that means is that your primary audience are other professors who have to read your work to give you a grade. So it doesn't matter how quote unquote engaging it is. They're not going to just skip over your paper. Hello, Feliday. Ooh, I like the picture. Night sky. So back to genre expectations. So you have these, you have the expectation of writing for your professor who has to read your work because they have to give you a grade, or at least they pretend to read your work and they give you a grade. Let's be real. If you're a graduate student, you know this. Your professor doesn't always read your paper. It's frustrating, but there you have it. But even so, your primary audience are people who will be indulgent, because they have to. It's part of their job. But when it comes to writing a journal article, when you are doing research and you find an article, you quickly skim through it so that you can get the general gist of it before then going into it and reading it in full. So if it's not engaging, or if the argument isn't clear, or if, the place that it fits in the existing scholarship isn't clear, you just abandon it, right? Unless the name of the scholar is, then sometimes, you'll be like, okay, well, this is a major scholar in my field, so I'm going to do the work and figure out why this article is important. But, audience is different. And so we are trained to write to professors. And so we also, because of that, we want to show what we learned, right? We want to give all the information, and, we want them to be dazzled by our knowledge. That's not how it is, right? In scholarly published writing. The goal, you're writing to an audience that has some basic knowledge of what you're talking about, which you either really quickly summarize it or just assume it already. I've noticed that, I sent in a draft of a paper that I would like to, that I had edited from a previous year that I'm trying to turn to an article. And when I got back my advisor's comments, I'm not going to go into detail about this, but one of the comments that I received was basically scholars in the field already know this. And this is exactly what Elizabeth Rankin is getting to, right? Scholars know certain things. The people who are reading your article or your chapter or your monograph or whatever already know certain things. And you have to realize that you're writing to that audience. You need to show how your work fits into the existing scholarship and furthers it in some way. And I kind of know that, but like really centering that is just, it's different than what I'm used to doing for term papers. Then I also have they always have this issue about saying something new. It's like, okay, what does it mean to say something new? I'm always afraid that an idea has been taken before. And this, after doing extensive research and thinking, okay, I finally have this original thing to say, this small thing that furthers an argument, this new perspective, whatever. Not entirely new, but something a little bit different. And then I find that article that has been written. I'm like, oh no, it's been done before. And it's really frustrating because I feel like I study the smallest thing, or that, but that has always been frustrating, is, being able to be clear about what I am offering that's new. But also that sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That sometimes there doesn't have to be this huge difference between what you're doing and what everyone has done before you. But it has been a challenge. That was a real challenge for the project I'm currently working on. But back to efficient writing. So what I've started doing, thanks to AuthorTube, is I put the font in Comic Sans. And so basically the idea is that Comic Sans, because it's a font that is really ugly, and it's not taken seriously. Although evidently it's quite helpful for people who have dyslexia. And perhaps this is one of the reasons, but I used Comic Sans and my writing speed improved greatly. Like, it really did. I think it's just in my head, I was like, oh, it's not so serious. It's not that deep, So that has helped me write more efficiently. And also just kind of writing the thing and then going back and editing within a time limit. Like, I have 25 minutes, like I write for 25 minutes, the Pomodoro method. I write for 25 minutes. And then, you have your little break. And then I will, maybe like revise for 25 minutes. But then I have to write something new so that it doesn't just force me to revise and re-revise and re-revise the same thing. At least it helped me this past weekend when I wrote 3 pages in one day. I know some of you are like, are you crazy, Fariba? I'm an overwriter. I write 30 pages when I'm supposed to write 5. And I've always wanted to have your problem. And perhaps you want to have my problem. I don't know. But yes, writing efficiently and writing to spec. That's basically it. I want to write to spec, and I want to know my audience, and I want to know kind of what's expected, like what's the order. Like, I read a lot of journal articles, but I don't really know how to structure these papers because I'm just used to structuring my paper according to like what I do for a term paper. So this is interesting. I just saw a video on AuthorTube by Alexa Dunn, who was talking about writing a proposal. She was talking about writing a proposal before you start writing a fiction book. But actually, writing a proposal can be a great way to get your ideas together before writing anything, any kind of scholarly piece. That's the advice Elizabeth Rankin gives. And I'm going to start doing that myself because, I will write an outline, but I don't see the big picture because I get bogged down in the details. So writing a proposal, but like knowing how to do that is something that I would like more information about. But the final thing is, again, this community bit. Graduate students are kind of alone when they have to do writing. And this is especially true when they're doing writing they want to publish. Even though faculty have their own faculty writing groups, and I think it would be really nice if, at least for us who work in the humanities, if we had kind of a graduate writing group for people who are, working on their own pieces, and like, I don't know, meeting via Zoom or something to share information. I don't know. I don't really know, but I just feel like we are so left alone. I think that's the big thing. I would like to have that support. So those are the ideas that I had. And I wanted to know if any of you guys if anybody watching has any thoughts about any of this. Does this ring true to you? What has been your experience with academic writing? I mean, I'm really interested in knowing. I've just found it very, very frustrating that, the stakes are so high, and yet graduate programs focus on the wrong things. In any case, I definitely want to make videos where I talk about what I've been learning. And sometimes I put I don't know, it's just, there's a lot of, it's kind of this, I want to demystify academic writing because it is still kind of shrouded in mystery for me. And I don't know. I find it to be, yeah, I find it hard. I find it hard to, figure out how to proceed. I have a great advisor who really is helpful. Not everybody does. I think I would just, I would like some support on that end. So anyway, those are some of the things that I was thinking about. Then I thought, maybe I should practice some creative writing because I never do creative writing. And I thought, yeah, maybe I should come up with a story. But I don't know. I must not be a creative person because I couldn't come up with a plot. But there's so much overlap too. Academic writing is so specific. It's so niche. And yet, it's writing. So there's a lot that's in common with other types of writing. And I think that as academics, we can just end up reading a particular genre and ignore what we can learn from other kinds of writing. Now on BookTube, it's great because, I'm reading, like I just finished reading a book about an alternative historical France with dragons. Like, you know what I mean? It's a different kind of book. That has been helpful, but I do want to address this, and I think that there can be a place there can be a way for us to talk about our struggles and to share that. But anyway, I do really recommend the work of writing. I have found it to be very helpful. So anyway, that is what I wanted to talk about, particularly. If at any point you want to share, feel free to do so. But I will transition into, kind of what you guys are currently reading. And yeah, so, let me know what you're currently reading. This is interesting. I'm not an academic. I'm just into reading. I wrote bits and pieces. Oh, cool. So what kind of things have you written? Have you, are there particular projects you've worked on, or what are some things that you've done? Write bits and pieces. So novels, short stories. Nothing that would be on your level. Like mysteries, fantasy? Because I read anything. I actually have considered, if I were to write something, I would either do an adult historical, murder mystery, or I would do a historical middle grade. And I love the idea of that. It would be a time travel book, which evidently there's no market for. Poetry. Oh, that's excellent. Poetry is so hard, but also that's great. That is definitely good as a cathartic thing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's probably true. I don't really think about writing as something that is relaxing or escapist. But, again, maybe if I did it more frequently, I do find when I do academic writing, and it's a project that I'm really interested in, then it does feel like when I actually am able to say what it is I want to say, it does feel cathartic. Like it feels like I'm releasing something that has just been in my head the whole time, and it just bogs me down. But that's great. Yeah, there's just a lot that I learn from all kinds of writing. Do you get tired of writing? Do I get tired of writing? I don't think I mean, do I ever, there are times, like, I think when a deadline is coming up when I write too much in one day. But generally, that's not it. I think I get frustrated with writing. I feel so negative about my writing. Because listen, I wasn't a natural writer as a child. I didn't have teachers fawning over me because my writing was just a masterpiece of the English language. I didn't have that. I really struggled a lot. And I'm definitely much better, and I think my writing is decent now. But, I've never had this feeling of like my writing is great, it's this thing that I'm great at. And so I have a lot of insecurities surrounding my writing, and also the fact that I write so slowly just makes me feel, and because I tend to be an honor writer who doesn't reach, well, I do reach the page limits, but like I really have to work on it. Whenever people are like, "Oh, I wrote 30 pages in 3 days," I'm like, "What? 30 pages in 3 how?" But I feel so insecure, like, and of course, they're complaining because they wrote too much, and I'm just like, "What?" I mean, it's kinda good that I just cut out things. I tend to just delete things that don't fit, but also, I kind of I guess I just feel very frustrated, about my writing. I don't think it's just it's that feeling of like, this is something that if I did it, I would like it, you know? Especially, because I think this is the thing too. I really love research. But if you don't publish what you learn, what you discover, then you're not really a scholar, you know? And you can love research, you can have fun with it, but the difference between a scholar and someone who does research is publishing. And it's the same thing with being a writer versus an author. A writer writes, but an author is someone who puts their work out there. And that and if you don't publish it, then you're not an author. And that's the thing. It's like, if I want to enter into this space and to contribute in some small way, then I have to publish my work. It's not enough for me to say, "Oh, I have interesting ideas. Let's talk about it." And I can present at a conference, but ultimately, I still have to present my work in some way. And that's the thing that I find frustrating. Is like, on the one, I do believe I can do it because I'm always up for an intellectual challenge. Physical, no, absolutely not. Nobody's weaker than me, but intellectual challenge, I'm up for it. And yet I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't something that made me feel so inadequate. So I guess that's the answer. It's a long, long answer to your question. So yeah. Anyway, if you guys have other thoughts about academia and academic writing, feel free to mention them in the chat. But yeah, I thought we could transition to something that more of you on BookTube can probably find more relatable, talking about we're reading. So I just finished reading the Address book by Deirdre Mask, which I mentioned last Sunday. And it actually came out April 14th, so you can buy it. I read the advanced review copy, and it was really interesting. I don't think I will ever see Street Addresses the same again. So basically, the Address book is a debut nonfiction about the racial, political, social implications of something that we all take for granted, street addresses, or the lack thereof. There are thousands of people in the world, millions of people in the world, who do not have street addresses. And, some choose to not have street addresses, which is an interesting case. And, there are other people like Indians living in the slums of Kolkata who would like to have an address, because without it, they don't have access to social services, they can't get a government-issued ID. And in the United States, when you apply for a job, you have to have a permanent address. And homeless people don't have a permanent address. Shelters don't count, and people can tell. A lot of times employers will discriminate against job applicants. So it's like we tell homeless people to get jobs, but they can't get a job without a home. They also need to have an address so that they can get, again, government-issued IDs. Super interesting book. It covers street addresses all over the world. Philadelphia, New York, Paris. Lots about Paris, because evidently France had a lot of influence on street addresses, and it's a really interesting part of the book. But also Japan and Haiti, South Africa, dealing with the apartheid and post-apartheid Africa. Questions about street names. There's, what do you do about street signs named after Nazis, or, what do you do? Or Confederate leaders? How do you deal with, and it's all about how street signs are, further the are used both by revolutionaries and reformers and totalitarian regimes. And it's a really great book, so I do recommend it. So I read that, and then of course I read this book called Les Lames du Cardinal by Pierre Pavel, or The Cardinal's Blades. And it's like the first book of this trilogy, and I just finished that, so I will be continuing with the trilogy. It's great. It's like Three Musketeers meets dragons. It's so much fun, and it's like spies, and Cardinal Richelieu, of course, has all these spies, and I would definitely recommend it. Falalu asks, do you have editors who help you edit your works? Yes, I mean, they're called my advisor. Those are, people who help you with your editing. As far as like what happens when you send an article to a journal, I actually don't know. I mean, I think they just, they will send you an edit. Well, no, what they do is they usually give you a revise and resubmit. So what they'll do is instead of just outright rejecting your article, they will say, oh, we will reconsider it if you take all of these, corrections, and you revise your article and then resubmit it. For monographs, which is books, you get an edit letter, and I think it's more like what it is in trade publishing. But we don't have, we have like critique partners in that sense, but it's usually your advisor. And if your advisor isn't any good, which I have a good advisor, but if your advisor is not giving you feedback, or if your professor or whatever class you're writing for isn't giving you feedback, oops, that was my phone, then you're kind of on your own. Yes. Hello, Kenyon. So for any of you who are new here, I just finished talking about academic writing and my struggles with academic writing. Feel free to share that. I started Lost Illusions by Balzac, just to throw that out there. Ooh, okay, cool. How are you doing with Lost Illusions? Is it good? Are you have I read that one? I don't think I've read that one. Okay, you gotta let me know. Is it good? I've read 4 of Balzac's works, and I hope to read another one next month. So yeah, let me know. So yeah, share the books you're reading. Want to know what you guys are doing. I'm 100 pages in. Okay, so I'm guessing there's like a description of some building, or like the description of some part of Paris or something, that is like really deep and has a lot of significance. I'll actually the plot of see what the plot is. It's very good so far. He's incredibly insightful. Absolutely. I 100% agree. I feel like Balzac really reminds me of Dickens, just in how his books become social commentaries. And I also love how like buildings or can become this metaphor about human relations. I do find him to be very insightful. You gotta let me know how this book goes. Okay, so it's called Les Illusions Perdues in French. Let's see. Yes, lots of detailed descriptions, class discrepancies, the struggle of the artist. Oh, wow. Oh, I see. So it follows David Séchard, who is an idealist poet. And he hires this man named Lucien Chardon, who works in his printing house. And so it's about a poet and living as a poet in Paris. Okay. Very interesting. Should be interesting to read to compare with how artists live in places like New York or LA, San Francisco. Yeah. Super interesting. Cool. Any other readings that you guys are doing? I'm trying to like mix it up and read nonfiction and fiction, like genre fiction. So he says, let's see. So I love his descriptions of buildings too. It starts with a very detailed description of a printing press, soon followed by beautiful descriptions of people and country places. Oh, cool. Now you're making me want to read that. So I know that there's a booktuber who is reading Balzac in May. I think her name is Madame Irma. And I was going to read Eugenie Grandet because I have that on my Kindle. But then, I don't know, this one sounds really appealing. I might do that. Sounds really cool. Man Disconnected. I'm still in the middle of True Believer. Also halfway through Man Disconnected by Philip Zimbardo. Ooh, what is that about? Man Disconnected. Oh, I see. Did I add that last week? Let's see. How technology has sabotaged what it means to be male. Interesting. Yeah. The influence of technology is interesting. Yeah. There's the book, So You Have Been Publicly Shamed, which deals with the effects of social media on people's reputations. I think the book was published right at the beginning of like Twitter, so like before all of the cancel culture and like everything else. Scary and interesting, I'm sure. So it deals with, yeah. I mean, and I think the really strange thing about the internet is that, it can be fiction. And fiction, we can say it's a fiction. At the same time, it's also not. It's like kind of the two are blended into one. And sometimes fiction is passed off as reality, our news, for example. Or, it's not even clear if sometimes I'm like, am I reading The Onion or am I reading actual news? There have been times when I'm like checking, is this real? But I think this is also sort of the more interesting question about, what happens when, I don't want to say the internet is entirely democratic because that's not true. You have companies that own all our data, basically. But the fact that, we can post whatever we want within reason. Okay, there are certain things, thankfully, that, humans aren't allowed to humans. People aren't allowed to post. I was distracted by whatever bug was just flying around. But I think when that happens, it's like, how do you even, you have to like distinguish between what is good and what is garbage. That can be really hard. And it's not always our fault, So yeah, there's this illusion of democracy. Perhaps that's it. There's this illusion of democracy, but actually there's a huge power imbalance between those who own the platforms where we communicate and us who communicate. So that somebody who has like millions of subscribers on YouTube, they certainly are influencers, right? Like they have authority in that sense. At least their fans see them as authoritative, whether or not they actually are. But so you're seen as having all this power, but really YouTube has all the power. I mean, like really there is just there's such an imbalance between, but you get the sense that anybody can post videos, anybody can do all of this. So that's a really interesting book. I'm really interested in more books dealing with social media and how social media affects our sense of reality, and who runs the internet. Sounds cool. Well, this is probably a great time to plug my May read-along of Molière's plays. I have a Goodreads group set up. I have a video where I introduce to you the 5 plays we will be doing, and beginning next Sunday, the live streams will be on the play for the week. So next Sunday, the live stream will be on Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, which is translated as The Bourgeois Gentleman by Molière. And Molière is mostly wrote comedies, so it should be fun. And, basically what I have decided to do is I will do a live stream where we just, talk about the play. And I will also have like a more traditional video where people can, post something in the comments if they prefer, if live streaming isn't their thing. I feel like because there's like an audience that is more interested in my live streams, and then there's an audience that's more interested in my traditional videos, and that's the way I'm going to do it. So yeah, if you've never read Molière and you want to read Molière, maybe you should join my read along, and you should use Project Gutenberg if you don't have the plays, and they're available in several languages, and it's all free. So recommend it. So next Sunday, we'll be talking about The Bourgeois Gentleman, and that's really what we're going to focus most on. But I suspect, there'll be time to talk about whatever it is you're reading. Anything else we are reading? What am I reading? I finished Nana by Émile Zola, which is actually the 9th book in his Rouge en Macquart series. This is my first Zola. Yes, Project Gutenberg. That is where you'll find the plays in any language. And if you want to know what plays we're doing, check out my video, because I have a Goodreads page, and we'll have discussions at the Goodreads page, and then you can see the plays, and everything is there. What was I even saying? I don't even remember anymore. Oh yeah, I read Nana by Émile Zola, and it's basically about a burlesque dancer / prostitute who uses men, but also the men are attracted. They're her clients, but she uses them to climb the social ladder. She dreams of being an honest woman and living in luxury. At least initially, she wants to help her son. So she has a son who's a baby who lives with her aunt, and she wants to provide for him. And money corrupts, and of course it's French literature, so it's going to be a tragedy. Like, this whole thing about, genre expectations. Modern fantasy literature, I can't speak to that, but classics, like French classics, tend to be tragedies. They hardly ever have a happy ending. So I'm very used to tragedies. When people talk about how romance has to have a happy ending, I'm like, I don't even know what a happy ending is. I mean, I joke, but it's so rare. So that the people I talk to who don't study French literature, they will ask me, did the person die yet? Did they commit suicide yet? Was anybody murdered in a duel? And they're usually right. They're usually right. I'm actually surprised when there's a happy ending. Kenyon says, I'm looking forward to Zola. Germinal sitting on a shelf calling me. So Germinal seems to be Zola's most popular book. I have only heard praise about Germinal. So, and I think it is the first book in the series. So yeah, it seems to me that if you read the books in order, that would be ideal. Because when I was reading Nana, there was a lot in the footnotes about La Saumure, which was written, I don't know if it's the 8th book or what, but it was written earlier, where we get to learn about Nana and how she was, like, where she grew up and, like, her childhood. And there's other details, like characters that return from older books. It's easier to do with Zola than Balzac, where Balzac wrote like 90 books or something. A little bit harder to read all of him. Honestly, here's the thing, and maybe fan fiction does this, but I love the idea of serialized fiction. I love it. I love the idea because, people fault serialized fiction for being super verbose and super descriptive. I'm just used to it, so honestly, I don't care if there's telling and not showing, because the telling is how I see, like, how it sets the scene. So I don't mind it so much, and I would love the return of serialized fiction. I think that would be really cool. Can you imagine, like, how everybody's like waiting for the new when Game of Thrones was on, I never saw it, but people were always waiting for the new episode, right? Like it would, show up on Netflix or no, not Netflix, HBO. I don't remember. Sorry, I'm not one for this, but like it would be cool if fiction was like that. I don't know. I would love the return of serialized fiction, and I also think that show versus tell as a rule for fiction. I mean it's a good rule of thumb, but I also don't swear by it. Like I would be fine with more telling. Kenyon says, there's an anecdote about Zola that thousands of coal miners chanted Germinal, Germinal at his funeral parade. Nowhere but France have writers been so revered, I feel like. Yeah, so, I mean, I think the thing, too, is that writers in France were social revolutionaries in many cases. I mean, not always, but in certain cases. They were seen as having been more than just writers. Like, they came to represent social movements. And especially in the case of Zola, who wrote in defense of Dreyfus. So this whole Dreyfus case about this Jewish government official, I guess, who was accused of being a spy. And Zola exposed this as anti-Semitism. And he wrote this piece called J'accuse, which is translated as I accuse. So Zola, by the time of his death, was more than just a writer of novels. He was someone who, really had the social brand. And the same would be true of Voltaire and Diderot and Rousseau. And yeah, I think that it might be the case. Kenyon, it's such a good idea. Dickens did it and managed to write masterpieces. Dostoevsky too. Yeah. I think also we're just much more patient with older fiction. Like, not all of us, but I know, like, there's definitely a group of us who are, like, okay with longer books that have side plots and, like, as long as there's ultimately the satisfaction of the story, I think we're okay with it. So, yeah, I think we can bring it back. Obviously, it would be modern, right? We'd be dealing with modern questions. I'm not saying we need to reproduce their prose, but simply that it can be serialized, and that it's fine. It's fine if it's not. Yeah, I mean, sort of the market is different too. Nowadays we want the books to be shorter because of the cost of publishing, and to get to the point and to be really exciting and not have any kind of meandering going on in the story. But so maybe fan fiction is where this stuff occurs, but fan fiction writing has it's interesting. I've tried it. I've started to try it because I don't want to ever dismiss something outright, but it's not usually of the age range that I would, I don't know, but yeah, it's it would have to be something that's done online because publishers are not willing to print 800-page debut novels. But serialized, it could be fun. Anything else? Do you have plans? Are you are you guys writing anything? Or I just have papers I have to write now. I mean, that are due in the next few weeks. So. I'm getting ready to read Notre Dame de Paris. Show versus tell. Can you explain that a bit? Okay, sure. So show versus tell is this idea that when you, instead of saying, for example, she felt sad, you show her feeling sad. Basically, that's the idea. The idea is that when you're writing a novel, instead of saying how a character is feeling or what a character is thinking, you imply it through the way that the character interacts with other characters, with her environment, that kind of thing. That's the difference between show versus tell. So today, one of the big advice, the advice that's given is that you should show through, the plot of the story, like the action of the story, instead of just telling us how we're supposed to feel, or instead of telling us that this character is kind and generous, you should show the character behaving kindly, being generous towards someone. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one, right? Instead of a person telling you the plot, you actually see the plot unfold through action. Yeah, that's the difference. And I think that today we really emphasize showing instead of telling. And I'm not here to dismiss it. I mean, I totally get that, because I feel like sometimes it just falls flat. Like you're not connecting with the characters because there's no action to justify what the author is saying about the characters. But I think that older works were much didn't have the same standards with respect to this, because there's a lot more telling than showing in classics, I think. It's interesting this is brought up because Balzac does a lot of telling instead of showing. Yeah. Although I have to say that it is so yes, he does. He does a lot of telling. He kind of tells you, what's going on in Paris, like what the social dynamics are. But he does show it in the way that he describes his characters, and in the way that it's almost like he's confirming it only after he's kind of described it. So there's showing, there's a lot of description. It's a lot of description. This is true of Zola too. This is true of Flaubert. There's a lot of description. So there's showing, but usually it's not so much showing of action. So then I guess that would be telling. It works with Balzac though, to me, because he weaves such a complex, interesting narrative. Yeah, that's another way of doing it. It might also be a genre expectation, or maybe an age range expectation, because I feel like I hear a lot about showing and not telling when it comes to young adult fiction. and it's not really an age range I'm very familiar with, like the books, but a lot of people who talk about books online, when they talk about writing advice, they're usually giving writing advice about books written for children and young adults. And for children, you can't just go on telling, it'll be boring. Like you'll put them to sleep. So you do have to have action. I just got done with some Dan Brown. He's a teller then. Yeah. Oh, Dan Brown. Dan Brown is one of those authors who, as a writer, he's not good. Like, he's not a good writer. His prose is terrible. I mean, it's not horrendous, but it's also not good. And there's some lines in there that are just horrible. And then also his knowledge of history is less than accurate. But I love his books. I have read so many of Dan Brown's books, and I will be the first to buy his books when they come out. I will even buy them in hardcover, and I don't do that with books. First of all, because I hate hardcover books. I hate the dust jacket coming out. I hate how heavy it is, but I will do it for Dan Brown. And simply because, even if it's laughable, like, okay, I think this is about the time the signal starts to fall away. It's great escapism. That's exactly it. It's good escapism. And you know what? This is the thing. Some books are just fun, and they're not deep, and it's kind of like eating candy. If you only ate candy, not a good idea, And I mean, you're not going to get health problems from reading, like, books like this. But, so it's not the best analogy. But, I mean, what I mean is, serve different purposes, and it gets at this question of expectation and audience. I expect Dan Brown to be fun. I don't expect Dan Brown to be a great writer. I don't expect Dan Brown's Robert Langdon to be anything like an actual professor, because he basically is in my field. If Robert Langdon was in my department working on what he's working on, which is basically medieval history, which is what I went into, he'd be horrible. But you know what? Doesn't every professor have this dream of being a James Bond character and fighting crime? I mean, come on. It's fun. It's fast food. Everyone is allowed to have their chicken nuggets and fries sometimes. Sometimes. If you're trying to be a great writer and you only read Dan Brown, or you only read Stephanie Meyer, or whatever. But if you read it sometimes, have fun. So, yeah, I think that, Dan Brown, yeah, probably a teller. Have you read Monsieur Dion is a Woman? I have not. I've not even heard of the book. We will see what it's about. Ooh, a tale of political intrigue and sexual masquerade. Born in 1728, French aristocrat Charles Dion de Beaumont was a diplomat, a soldier, and a spy when rumors that he was a woman began to circulate. Dion denied nothing and was finally compelled by Louis XVI to give up male attire and live as a woman. Although celebrated as one of the century's most remarkable women, Dion was revealed after his death in 1810 to have been unambiguously male. Oh, interesting. So this is someone who is either transgender or gender non-conforming. Oh, interesting. How fascinating. Yeah. I need to add that. That is so interesting. Yeah, very cool. Very, very, very interesting. Thank you for the recommendation. So, any parting words? So this was fun. Yes, this was a lot of fun. I always like talking to you all. So yeah, next week we will be talking about The Bourgeois Gentleman by Molière. And then, whatever time is left, we will do other kinds of fiction. Whatever, or nonfiction, whatever you're reading, basically. I have a book on Kindle about the Great Lakes, which is by Dane Egan, and I'm from the Great Lakes region. I'm from the Cleveland area in Ohio, if you're from the US. So, it's something that I want to learn more about. And I'm also really, really interested in American wildlife and conservation. So that's something that's coming up. Looking forward to Molière. Excellent. Hope everyone stays safe and has a good week. Yes, you too. Stay safe. Stay 2 meters away or 6 feet, whichever region of the world you're in. And do some great reading. So I hope you guys have a fantastic week. Bye now.